All right, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why exactly your back hurts, despite the fact that you've been receiving physical therapy, chiropractic, medical intervention, yoga, that type of thing. I have been a chiropractor for over 26 years. I'm going to give you realistic advice based on my experience and based on the scientific literature. And I'm going to try to make this video as complete as possible and give you information that you can actually use today to start solving your back problems. This is going to be a very detailed video. I'm going to assume that you already have some knowledge about the spine. Most videos that start talking about this type of subject start off with a dissertation about the anatomy of the spine, that there are 5 vertebrae of the lumbar spine. They talk about the discs, they talk about the muscles. I'm going to assume you already have that knowledge, and we're just going to get right into it. There are essentially, in my experience, 3 different types of challenges when it comes to different types of patients. And this is one of the most difficult things, is that back pain is not a diagnosis. Back pain is a symptom of a particular problem. So as simple as we can make it, here are the 3 types of most challenging types of patients. The first is the either young person who is a cheerleader. It's usually a female, extremely flexible. They could be a swimmer. These are people that have what's called hypermobility, too much movement of the joints of their spine and not enough strength training and abnormal joint motion. That is a challenging type of patient. The second type of patient would be one that has sacroiliac joint dysfunction. And this is usually the patient will have pain on one side of their spine more than the other. The third type of patient would be a disc herniation or a internal disc derangement. This is very often overlooked, which is the internal disc derangement. And we're going to talk about that in general because there's lots of information on disc herniations. I have on my channel things on disc herniations and how to best take care of those as well. But let's first talk about the patient who is the young female, athletic, usually lean type of individual. And also, interestingly enough, sometimes you'll get these types of patients, and these are usually obese patients who are older females, and they can have the same type of problem. Usually this type of patient has generalized low back pain in the middle of their lower back. So if you were to number the vertebrae from 1 to 5, usually they get pain at about L3. When I ask them to physically show me what they can do with their spine, I usually start out looking at their posture. And then when I have a patient bend forward, usually these are the types of patients that can palm the floor. So if you are the type of patient where you are able to, without even stretching ever a day in your life, literally bend forward, legs are straight, all the way down to the floor, you can even palm the floor, then this might likely be your situation. And by the way, I'm going to talk about the other situations in just a moment. So hang tight with me, because if you understand one, you can understand where we're going with the others. The patient usually does not hurt when they bend forward and touch the toes. However, here's the big one. When they bend backwards, usually they will start bending backwards, and I can usually take my finger, point at L3 and say, "You hurt right there, don't you?" And they go, "Yeah, that's exactly it, doc." Well, guess what? It isn't rocket science. Usually when the person bends backwards, if you're watching them without their shirt on, or you pull up their shirt and see, their back will literally pancake like this. The pain is usually at L3, but the place where they're having the problem, where there's a restricted joint motion, is usually between L4 and L5 and L5 and S1. And this is where you need to adjust the patient to restore proper extension motion into those joints. This often partially solves the problem. I'm going to tell you exactly how to completely solve the problem in just a second, so hang tight with me. But if the patient bends backwards and their spine bends like this rather than a nice curve, and it hurts, particularly where the bend is, then that's right there. That's the exam. I mean, you already know what's happening. The patient has hypermobile joints, meaning their joints move too much in certain areas, and it's causing a strain on the joints. And very often, when they go into extension, the spinous processes will actually literally touch each other, and they're getting a bone bruise on the spinous process. So how do we deal with this? Number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use motion palpation, or what Leonard Fay calls restriction palpation, in order to determine the greatest decrease of the range of motion where there's a restriction. So if it's lateral bending plus extension, or if it's rotation plus extension, that's going to tell me exactly how to do the adjustment. So we're going to be adjusting the L4, L5, S1 area into the most restricted movement, which usually includes extension, as well as some type of lateral bending or rotation. Number two, these patients usually are in sports such as swimming, like when they're doing the butterfly, or they're doing yoga or cheerleading. These patients have trouble because they're usually naturally flexible, and because they're naturally flexible, they tend to want to do more flexibility training. So the hardest part of this is to get the patients to stop doing stretching and start strength training. Strengthening their muscles makes a tremendous long-term difference in the longevity of their sport. So I have on my channel an area called playlists. Every channel has one. And I have all the core training. Those are the exercises that these patients tend to do well with. And I would recommend that you look at those. They basically include learning to stabilize the transverse abdominis, learning to stabilize the core, so that when they bend more at the hips, as well as locking in the lumbar spine. Pallof presses, bird dogs, the McGill plank, as well as the side plank are basically it. If they do a rotational sport, then I will add Pallof presses to it, and that usually within about a month to a month and a half, the patient is pretty much pain-free. That's a fun thing to do to get patients out of pain, because most patients have been suffering for a long time, usually with this, sometimes years. I just recently had a patient that had pain for 5 years, and 6 weeks of treatment, and they're good to go. So that's always fun. So now, that's that type of patient. Now, keep in mind that doesn't mean all back pain should be solved that way, and that's the problem. On the internet, you get videos like mine that have a title that says "Solve Back Pain," and we assume that all back pain is the same. It's not, because now we're going to talk about that second type of patient, the sacroiliac joint type of patient. Now, this patient, usually the pain started when they were bending forward and twisting. They will usually feel a catch. Old people call it a catch in their get-along, which I always thought was kind of a funny way of describing it. But when an older patient says, I have a catch in my get-along, you almost always know that it's going to be a sacroiliac joint problem. Now, the sacroiliac joint is where the pelvis and the sacrum come together, and it's a weight-bearing joint. So when a patient goes from a sitting to standing position, usually they'll get a catch, and that is the sacroiliac joint. They'll often catch on one side versus the other, and when you check their posture, they will not have any antalgia. So they will not be leaning from one side to the other. That's very, very important. And the reason why is because when I get to the third type of back problem, a disc problem, an internal disc derangement, which you probably never have heard of until after this video, you'll see what I mean. So a sacroiliac joint problem does not have antalgia. Now, with the sacroiliac joint problem, sometimes the pain, if it's chronic, will be on the opposite side of the restriction. But if it's new, very often it'll be on the same side of the restriction. So this confuses people, because if you have right-sided pain, Sometimes I may be adjusting the left side if it's a chronic problem. But patients usually have a hard time going from a sitting to standing position. There's a kind of a catch when they do it. And so what happens is for these types of patients, this is where an adjustment actually will help tremendously. Usually you can get these patients out of pain in 2 or 3 visits if it's not a chronic condition. Now, what happens is this. The rehab is totally different. The muscles have to be analyzed. And I'm going to say that 80 to 90% of the time, the patient will have some type of iliopsoas or hip flexor tightness. This is a case where hip flexor stretching is absolutely beneficial. Whereas you could see in the previous example, that patient did not need stretching. In fact, they will get hurt by stretching. If they go on the internet and they actually read back pain and they drink the Kool-Aid and see that someone recommends psoas stretching, they're going to be very disappointed because the stretching is going to make them worse. But in this particular case with a sacroiliac joint problem, the stretching of the hip flexors actually improves the situation. Some people will have both hip flexors as tight. Some people will have one hip flexor that's tight. Ironically, there is no real way to know in advance which side is tighter than the other. You probably could not go bad doing both sides as stretching. You'll probably notice that one side is tighter than the other, and that is the side that you want to stretch. In addition to that, glute bridges will also help these patients. Sacroiliac joint problems do not really resolve with bird dogs and planks and side planks. They resolve with glute strengthening and hip flexor stretching. So that's the second type of back pain. Now the third is a disc problem. Now if you Google disc, immediately what's going to happen, which the algorithm shoots to the top, is a disc herniation. Second would be disc degeneration. I don't even think a top 10 problem when it comes to back pain would be called an internal disc derangement. But this is a condition that you may not have heard of, and how it works is this, that the disc material is, you have to think of it, the traditional way of thinking of it is like a jelly donut with the outside fibers, where the collagen fibers are lined up like this. And typically when those fibers rip, the jelly of the jelly donut or the disc will seep through. It's almost like a toothpaste consistency. And as it swells, the fibers of the disc will swell. And that is what is traditionally known as a disc bulge or disc herniation. Now, an internal disc derangement is where the fibers on the inside of the disc will slightly tear. Sometimes there's a pop when it happens to this patient, but it will internally derange rather than externally on the outside of the fiber. Sometimes you will see on x-ray, if this is a chronic problem, a person will have end plate fractures of their vertebral bodies. That's a major problem, and that tells you that it's a chronic condition. Typically, a patient will wake up with this back pain after doing something the day before. Usually it's a lifting or a straining type of injury. These patients are screwed because when they walk in, they're usually coming into the office on their hands and knees. They are typically antalgic away from the side of the disc. So if the disc is irritated on the right side of their body, then they will usually be leaned over forward to the left. So they're going to be leaning away from the disc derangement. These patients cannot move their back. And this happens in the rest of the spine as well, more commonly the neck, where the person their head will be tilted over like this. That's the same thing that happens in the lower back. If you test them, you will find that they have a hard time putting weight on the side where the internal disc derangement is. So if it's the right side and you ask them to stand on just the right leg, they won't be able to do it. These people are in misery. The strange thing is they will not have any neurological signs, and this is what differentiates between a disc herniation and an internal disc derangement. Now, with an internal disc derangement, they will have antalgia, but what they're not going to have is any neurological problems. So their reflexes are normal, their sensory is normal, and their muscle strength is normal as it can be for the amount of pain that they're in. So they don't have any neurological symptoms. And what that means is they don't have any numbness, they don't have any tingling, they don't have any burning down the leg, which you think would happen during sciatica or a disc herniation. And this is the clue. Again, if a patient walks in, they're bent over forward, leaning to the side, I already know they're antalgic. If I test their reflexes, test their sensory, those are all normal. And then when you ask the patient, do you have any numbness, tingling, burning down the back of the leg, down the front of the thigh? They always say no, but they're in misery. They can hardly sit down. These are very often overlooked by most medical practitioners only because it's just not a common problem. If they send them for an MRI, there may not even be a disc bulge at all or any type of degeneration if it's a young person. And thus, the patient is left with, well, gee, you must have just badly sprained your back. It's not a disc herniation. They don't send them to the orthopedist because the orthopedist isn't going to do surgery on this. And they just send them home with pain meds. And this can be rapidly changed through chiropractic. I just had a patient recently. He couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. So his wife took him to the hospital. He was in the hospital for an entire day. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And he actually left, or his wife took him out of the hospital. When he came to my office, they went directly from the hospital to my office. He still had the needle in his arm. And I thought, they didn't take the needle out? And she says, no, we just left, because they left him there in the rooms. They just walked out. So that's not advised, by the way. But I analyzed him. They did a CAT scan at the hospital. They did blood work. They did urine analysis. They just couldn't find out what was wrong. And we adjusted him. Now, the key to doing this adjustment is speed and finesse. It's not force. At this point, when a person has an internal disc derangement, they simply cannot do exercises. You just have to numb them down with some ice and hit that vertebrae. The exam typically is, quite frankly, easy as a chiropractor. If you're good at palpation, you can pinpoint exactly which vertebrae it is. I'm going to say 95% of the time it's L5. And because the patient is leaning over to the left, let's say, I know that it's sprained on the right. So what I do is I try to get them on the table with their right side down in side posture. And what I do is I will use a Gonstead pull move on L5, pushing it into extension and tractioning it, essentially. And very often you'll get a very good release of that area. The patient stands up, and because it's an internal disc derangement, it's not going to change right away. They stand up. Usually they'll say there's some relief, but they're still hunched over. Usually I tell them to ice it for about 20 minutes every hour. If they're going to be in pain for 16 hours, they're going to ice it 16 times. That's mainly for pain relief. And then usually the next day they're walking a little bit straighter. You come in, you adjust them. The third day they're starting to walk even straighter, and boom, I mean, they're better. So, a lot of times, how come your back continues to hurt despite therapy? The answer is, unless you have an accurate diagnosis, then you're going to be just throwing darts at your back pain, trying to hope that it will improve. If you take that first example of a thin, young female or an obese female who has hypermobility, and you tell them to do yoga, you are simply going to make them worse. There are specific exercises that help with that specific type of back pain. Likewise, if you have a patient that has an internal disc derangement and you buy into the idea that stretching is going to help, you're lost. You're just absolutely lost. You're just going to continue to aggravate that back forever as long as you keep stretching. It just will not work. Likewise, if you just give someone pain medication, it may, in theory, help their pain, but you're not really addressing the acute as well as the long-term things that will benefit these types of patients. Now, naturally, there are other types of back pains. I'm going to say, as a chiropractor, those are the easy ones. But what I did is, on this video, I picked the 3 most common, difficult type of back problems to solve, because these are the ones that I see that are constantly mismanaged. They're just thrown drugs at, and if that doesn't work, they're just given stronger drugs. People buy into an idea, they drink the Kool-Aid and say, well, yoga must help. My neighbor said yoga will help. Or some people will just do the wrong exercises. So hopefully this video has helped you try to figure out, maybe you have this type of back problem, or maybe a friend has this type of back problem and they've been trying a therapy and it's not working. Maybe send this video to them and let them watch it. Maybe it may help them. If you have a specific type of problem and you have a question and you would like to contact me either through the phone or Zoom, we do Zoom and telephone consultations. There is a fee for it, but wait until the end of the video and I will tell you exactly how to get a hold of me if you would like to have a private one-on-one conversation with me to try to discuss your problem and see if we can get you some relief. So hang tight. I have an advertiser that's going to tell you about their product, and then at the end, you can figure out how to get a hold of me.
Lower blood pressure, enhanced heart health, protect your arteries, improve your energy, improve your bone health, help migraines, chronic pain, and depression, reduce artery stiffness, and better sleep. These are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the benefits of magnesium. The soil sucks, we don't eat enough organic vegetables, and that is why it's so hard to get enough magnesium in our diet. Now, the supplements that I take are from the video sponsor, Magnesium Breakthrough, and they have a great product that has 7 different types of magnesium in it, all listed right here. Now, when you get all these major forms of magnesium, then your body really starts to improve, and that is when the magic happens. I take 2 tablets at nighttime. It gives me 500 milligrams of magnesium per day, and it really helps me sleep like a baby. There will be a discount code and the link for this type of magnesium down in the description. If you have specific questions in regard to blood pressure, your own health and wellness, we actually do Zoom appointments as well as telephone appointments. We do these Zoom and telephone appointments from all around the world. So you're more than welcome to call our office, schedule an actual Zoom or a telephone consultation with me. And what we're gonna do is we are going to section off a piece of our day just to speak to you and answer all your questions. So if you're interested in that, there's a link down below. You can get to my website and then just contact us. Now, there is a fee for a Zoom or a telephone consultation, so it's not free, but I can promise you this, you're gonna get your money's worth.